The sea is not a safe place. The technology involved in shipbuilding gets better with each passing year, but we're still no match for Mother Nature. Some truly terrible things have happened out at sea, and so have some spectacular accidents. We have no wish to be morbid on this channel, but some of these accidents have to be seen to be believed. So, let's see them. The Titanic and the Lusitania are probably the two most famous ship disasters in human history, but the SS Eastland disaster claimed more lives than both of them. Why is it then that the disaster has largely been forgotten by historians? Might it have something to do with the fact that it happened on the Chicago River rather than out at sea? The Eastland was built by the Michigan Steamship Company, ordered in October 1902, and delivered in May 1903. Her owners called her the Speed Queen of the Great Lakes, which is where she served as a passenger ship for tourists. There was a bad omen just 2 months after she launched when she crashed into and sank a tugboat called the George W. Gardner in Lake Street Bridge Dock. But the most tragic incident she was involved in didn't happen until 24 July 1915. On that day, the SS Eastland rolled onto its side while tied to its dock in the Chicago River. 844 passengers and crew lost their lives. That's still the biggest loss of life from a single shipwreck on the Great Lakes to this day. A later investigation determined that the SS Eastland was overloaded with passengers and that water ballast had been mishandled. In November 1120, a vessel known simply as the White Ship collided with Quilleboeuf Rock near Barfleur, France, and sank. Aboard the ship, William Atheling, the son and only heir of King Henry I of England. In June 2021, over 900 years after the sinking, divers announced that they believe they've discovered the wreck. The sinking of the White Ship was a hugely significant event in 12th century England, leading to a crisis over who would succeed Henry as king. That crisis eventually turned into a civil war. While the archaeologists are positive that they've found the right wreck, it's hard to identify it from these images. What little we can see of the deck is covered in seaweed. It barely looks like a ship at all. Perhaps this discovery can put an end to the speculation about what caused the vessel to sink. It's said that conditions at sea were calm on the day it went down, and that the ship wasn't attacked. Instead, the rumor has always been that everyone aboard the White Ship drank copious amounts of wine both before and during their departure from Normandy, and that their drunkenness was responsible for the navigational error that saw the ship hit the rocks. When a ship is destroyed in an explosion, that's usually the end of the ship. That's what makes the Chinese passenger steamship SS Kanga special. The vessel was almost totally destroyed by an explosion on board in December 1948, while she was close to the mouth of the Huangpu River. She was already 9 years old by that point, and the damage caused by the unexplained blast was so severe that her wreck wasn't completely cleared from the channel until 1956. Incredibly, military shipbuilding experts were able to salvage and refurbish her hull before relaunching her 3 years later as the SS Dongfang Hong 8, after which she remained in service with the Chinese Navy until 1983. Even then, though, there was a further twist to come in the tale of this old ship. She spent 17 years in storage before shipbreaking operations began in the year 2000. Just days after those operations began, a huge oil fire broke out on the ship and utterly destroyed it. It's almost as if the SS Kanga decided to go out on its own terms, rather than allow someone to break it into pieces. There's a shipwreck in Vavu Atoll near Kyohu Island in the Maldives. Locals refer to it only as the Kyohu Shipwreck because they have no idea what else to call it. Their best guess is that it's an old Indonesian fishing vessel, but a best guess is all it is. They can't even say when it first appeared. What they can say, however, is that the presence of the wreck has done wonders for the local tourism industry. The Keohou wreck is generally recognized as the most picturesque shipwreck in the world. It attracts literally thousands of visitors every year who want to swim up close to it and grab the perfect picture or video for their Instagram account. Should we be encouraging that sort of thing? Probably not, but there's no denying that the pictures look fabulous. When we said this video would be full of amazing and incredible accidents, we didn't mean that all of those accidents would be bad. There is such a thing as a happy accident, and the story of this abandoned fishing vessel drifting along into a paradise location to become a tourist attraction is the very definition of a happy accident. A few moments ago, we talked about the SS Eastland disaster, which is the most deadly maritime disaster ever to happen in America's Great Lakes. However, it isn't the worst maritime disaster in United States history. That tragic description belongs to the SS Sultana. She was a sidewheel steamboat launched in January 1963 and put into service on a busy route between St. Louis, Missouri and New Orleans, Louisiana. Her active life lasted little more than 2 years. The 1,719-ton cotton trading vessel was carrying 2,137 people when 3 of the vessel's 4 boilers exploded simultaneously on April 27, 1865. The damage caused by the explosion meant there was no chance of rescuing the Sultana, which sank near Memphis, Tennessee. 1,168 of the people aboard the ship at the time didn't survive. The precise cause of the boiler explosion isn't known, but what is known is that the Sultana had a theoretical capacity of just 376 passengers, so she was carrying 5 times as many people as she ought to have been at the time of the disaster. There should have been an inquiry, but the government of the time was distracted by the end of the Civil War and the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, so nobody was ever held accountable. The sinking of the Costa Concordia is one of the most notorious maritime incidents in recent history, and yet it would never have happened at all was it not for the arrogance and incompetence of Italian Captain Francesco Schettino. The cruise ship hit a reef close to the island of Giglio in January 2012, while Schettino was attempting to show off to his passengers and the people on the coastline. His recklessness resulted in the boat capsizing, a crime that he's currently in prison for and will likely remain there for at least the next 10 years. To compound his error, he also attempted to abandon the ship without attempting to ensure the safety or rescue of the thousands of people aboard the vessel at the time of the incident. For a long time after the incident, the ship remained in the water tipped onto its side, but it was eventually righted in July 2014 and dragged to Genoa, there to be broken apart for scrap. It later transpired that Schettino had ordered the ship to be sailed close to the coastline as a salute to the people watching from the shore, and had failed to take into account the presence of sharp rocks in the vicinity. The Pasuta shipwreck doesn't look real. The combination of the broken-down wooden wreck and the utterly unique backdrop makes it look like something that was designed in a video game. We can assure you it's very much real though, and you'll find it on Graham Island in British Columbia, Canada. The dreamy backdrop is provided by the unique scenery and rainforests of the Haida Gwaii archipelago, a largely unspoiled place that very few people have even heard of, let alone visited. The wreck of the Pasuta has been on the beach here since 1928, when the 264-foot-long log barge ran aground during a storm while making its way down to Lell River. She was already old by that point, having begun life as a steamship before being converted for logging just after the turn of the century. Today, it looks like there's almost nothing left of her when you survey the wreck from a distance, but get closer and you'll see that the metal portholes are still in place, and at least part of the ship is buried beneath the sand. The parts of the Pasuta above the sand will eventually disappear completely, but hopefully not for another few decades. The MV Rena incident is well known in New Zealand. It was the country's worst ever marine environmental disaster. The ship, a Liberian-flagged container vessel, ran aground on the Astrolabe Reef in 2011 and spilt more than 200 tons of fuel into the sea. Human error was to blame for the grounding. The crew had been attempting to make adjustments to the agreed course to save time and failed to take into account sideways drift. On top of that, the manually adjusted plan was 5 degrees off course from where the vessel should have been headed. As a result, it ran directly over the reef at full speed and was badly damaged. Over the weeks that followed, the waves and the tide weakened the cracks that had been caused by the impact, eventually splitting the stranded ship into 3 pieces. More than 2,000 seabirds were killed by the resultant oil slick, and both the captain of the ship and his first mate faced criminal negligence charges. The ship had to be written off. Divers visited what's left of the wreck in December 2020 and confirmed that the local environment had begun to recover, with a kelp forest thriving around what's left of the hull. The gigantic Panamax bulk carrier MV Drake is still afloat today, and because her name has been changed, few of the people who see her know that she was involved in a notorious beaching incident in 2007. Back then, she was known as the Pasha Bulker. Her famous accident happened on June 8th of that year, while she was waiting in the sea off Nobby's Beach in New South Wales, Australia, preparing to load coal. The crew had been warned about an approaching storm, but the captain chose to ignore it. Embarrassingly, the ship never radioed for help, never attempted to deploy an anchor, and had a fully operational engine when it was beached. The crew, including the seemingly incompetent captain, were rescued, but the ship was stuck fast between the beach and a rocky reef. While she was trapped there, the protest group Greenpeace used her as an advertising billboard, spray painting anti-coal slogans on the side of the stricken vessel. It wasn't until July 2nd that the carrier was finally refloated after 2 failed rescue attempts. From there, it took a year to fully repair her, and she was relaunched as the Drake in mid-2008. The Shetland Islands are off the north coast of Scotland. As you can probably imagine, it's a cold, wet, and windy place. Conditions around the islands make them a dangerous place for ships, as the Brer oil tanker found out when it hit the rocks of Quendale Bay on the south tip of Shetland on January 5, 1993. There were hurricane-force winds blowing through the region at the time, and to make matters worse, the vessel's engines had failed. Disaster was inevitable, and the only good news attached to this story is that the crew were airlifted to safety by helicopter before it was too late. The news for local wildlife wasn't as good. The wrecked tanker spilt an estimated 85,000 tons of crude oil, killing at least 1,500 birds and a quarter of the local gray seal population. A subsequent inquiry found that the Brer, which was built in Japan in 1975, didn't have the double hull design that ought to have been a requirement for any vessel carrying so much crude oil, and that Captain Alexandros Gelis demonstrated a fundamental lack of basic seamanship. It seems harsh to blame the captain for failed engines, but that's what happened. The title of World's Deadliest Oil Spill isn't one that anybody wants to hold, but something has to hold it, and that dubious honor goes to the supertanker known as Amoco Cadiz. The vessel was transporting crude oil for the enormous Shell Oil Company when she ran aground close to France on the Port Saul Rocks on 16 March 1978. The ship's captain was trying to avoid a collision with another vessel by turning sharply, but the sudden movement jammed the Amoco Cadiz's rudder, and she drifted helplessly toward the coastline. A distress call was sent out, and a passing tugboat attempted to pull the stricken vessel away from the rocks, but the towline parted, and the momentum of the supertanker could not be stopped. Even dropping the anchor didn't work because the flukes broke away. the Amoco Cadiz hit the rocks hard and spilt more than 200,000 tons of crude oil out into the water, along with a further 4,000 tons of fuel. The force of the impact ripped the ship apart, splitting it into 3 separate parts and causing it to sink. An incalculable amount of marine life was lost as a result. We've mentioned the RMS Lusitania in passing, so let's tell her full story. The sinking of the RMS Lusitania was the event that triggered American entry into the First World War. The ocean liner was bound from New York to Liverpool in May 1915 when it was attacked by a German U-boat off the old head of Kinsale, Ireland. After being hit by a single torpedo, a secondary explosion happened inside the ship for unknown reasons, and the vessel sank in under 20 minutes. Only 761 of the 1,960 people aboard the Lusitania survived. Most of the casualties were American citizens. Images of the sinking ship were subsequently used in American war propaganda. The American and British governments both declared their outrage over the sinking of a passenger ship. The Germans insisted the Lusitania was a legitimate military target and was secretly carrying ammunition sent to the British by the Americans. The Allies consistently denied this allegation and used the incident to fuel public anger. When the war was eventually over and the wreck was examined, it was found to contain more than 4 million rounds of machine gun ammunition in its cargo, in addition to 5,000 shrapnel shell casings and 3,000 brass percussion artillery fuses. The weapons shouldn't have exploded though, and the cause of the secondary explosion remains unknown. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching and see you soon!